Welcome everyone to Daf Yomi 1 week at a time. This is Masechet Zevachim, and today is our fourth lesson where we are going to be reviewing Daf 22 through 29, which is tomorrow's Daf. And then Be'ezrat Hashem, next week we're going to go back to our regular day of Wednesday night. So just so everyone should know so next week, Be'ezrat Hashem, we'll go back to Wednesday night. Okay, we are at the bottom of Daf 21. We're discussing the kior, right? The kior was the washing, the water basin that was in the Beit HaMikdash, in the temple, where the kohanim would draw water from in order to wash their hands and their feet. So the Gemara tells us that the kior had to be big enough to hold water for at least 4 kohanim to be able to wash their hands and feet at the same time. And Daf 22, the top, tells us that the kohanim are allowed to use any sanctified vessel to wash with. And the Gemara will explain what this means. That basically the water needs to come from the kior. It could go into a kli sharet, into a sanctified utensil or vessel, and then they can wash from that. The reason that the sanctified vessel can also be used is because it was also anointed with the shemen hamishcha, with the anointing oil. Okay, so from here, the Gemara discusses water from a mikvah and discusses what type of water was actually in the kior. So any liquid that can be added to a mikvah can also be added to the kior, but it cannot be added to the small amount of water that a person uses to wash their hands. So a mikvah, right, a ritual bath, needs to have at least, at a minimum, 40 se'ah, 40 cubits of water. It's a volume. Let's say a mikvah had exactly 40. So then they added 1 se'ah of a liquid, meaning juice or something that's not water, and then they removed one se'ah of water. This would still be a valid mikvah, even though there aren't 40 se'ah of water anymore. It's 39 of water and 1 of juice. The idea is that the juice becomes diluted and becomes part of the ritual bath, part of the mikvah. Okay. So then the Gemara explains that the water that's from a mikvah is valid or kasher for the water of the kior. Again, right, the basin in the Beit HaMikdash. And then there's a discussion if you need mayim chayim for the kior. Mayim chayim is essentially either rainwater or water that comes from a spring, right? Natural water, as opposed to water that comes out of a faucet. So the mikvah needs to be mayim chayim, and here there's one opinion that so too the kior also needs to have mayim chayim, or actually any type of water would be valid for the kior. Okay, if you remember last week we discussed a list of different kohanim, different priests that were invalid to do the work in the temple, right? Pasul for avodah. So one of the people that we mentioned is what's called an arel. Arel is a man who is uncircumcised. Here, generally, when the Gemara speaks of an arel in this context, it's usually a person whose 2 older brothers actually died because they had a brit milah. They probably had hemophilia, and because the two older brothers died when they were circumcised, the third child, you're not allowed to do circumcision because we don't want him to die. That being said, so it's okay that he doesn't have a brit milah. That being said, he's not allowed to do the avodah in the Beit HaMikdash. And if he does, he invalidates the sacrifice. This is learned from a verse in Yechezkel that talks about an arel lev and arel basar. Right, the idea is, and we actually just said this on Yom Kippur in all of our davening, the word arel again means uncircumcised or covered, right? So you can have a covering on your heart and you can have a covering on your genitals. And the idea is that an arel or arlei basar is someone who doesn't have a brit milah, and arlei lev is someone who is an apikores, right? Someone who doesn't believe in God or negates the existence of God. Okay, the next category is a kohen who is impure, who is tameh, and now the Gemara discusses what type of tum'ah, right? What type of impurity would make this kohen invalidate the service? So one opinion is that it's tameh. Sorry. One opinion is that it is a person who is tameh sheretz. Again, touched one of the 7 like creepy crawly animals. And if the person was tameh met, meaning impure from a dead body, we know, and we've learned this before, that because tumat met would be valid for the community, right? The term in the Gemara is tum'ah hutra betzibur. When the nation, we learned this in Masechet Pesachim, we also learned it recently, when the nation was impure, or a majority of the nation was impure, then they would be allowed to bring their sacrifices to the Beit HaMikdash. And then the question is, because it's okay on a national level, maybe it's also okay on an individual level as well. And therefore, if a kohen is tameh met, then and they did a service in the Beit HaMikdash, it would not invalidate the sacrifice. However, if he was tameh sheretz, that would invalidate the sacrifice. And then there's a discussion about Pesach Sheni. Right? If you remember, Pesach, if an individual is impure when we get to Pesach, then they have an opportunity, then they don't bring the sacrifice on Pesach, but they have an opportunity a month later to bring the sacrifice b'tahara, right, in its purity. And there's a discussion of what type of tum'ah are we talking about, right? Is the impurity from a dead body or from a sheretz as well? And that's the discussion at the top of Daf 23. The Gemara mentions the tzitz. The tzitz was a headband that was made out of gold that the Kohen Gadol wore. And the Gemara explains that because the Kohen Gadol, the high priest, wore this band, it would allow impurities that happened in the Beit HaMikdash, specifically about the blood. It would make them okay, but not impurities that had to do with the body, tumat guf. And therefore there is a distinction between the different types of tum'ah and what would make it valid and what would not make it valid. There's a verse that teaches that, again, Aharon, meaning the Kohen Gadol, can bear the sin of the sacrifices of the kodshim, of the things that were sanctified in the Beit HaMikdash. However, it does not accept pigul, which we're going to learn about in a little bit, or notar. Notar is meat that was left over past the time that it was allowed to be used. So those things are problems, and the tzitz does not help with these things. Only sins of tum'ah, and that is what the tzitz works. Right? It works if the meat of the sacrifice became tameh, became impure, but if the kohen or the owner became impure, right? So if it's tumat met, then they cannot bring the sacrifice, or maybe it is only discussing tumat sheretz. Okay, the next invalid kohen is someone who does the work sitting down. This is based on a verse that says that you have to stand to serve. Therefore, it's a mitzvah that when you do the avodah, when you do the work in the Beit HaMikdash, you need to be standing. And not only is it a mitzvah, meaning that's the way it is done properly, but it is also taught, again, to teach that it is essential, meaning if you do not stand while doing the service of the temple, it invalidates that sacrifice. Okay, and what happens? It's as if the person is a non-kohen, right? What's called a zar. If a kohen is sitting while doing the work, it's as if a non-kohen did the work, and it invalidates the sacrifice. Okay, however, he does not get the penalty of death for this issue, for this type of service. Only a kohen who's lacking the proper clothing, or if the kohen didn't wash beforehand, those are the cases where you get the punishment of death. But sitting does not incur that punishment. Okay, Daf 24 adds also the idea that if the kohen is drunk, he also gets the punishment of death. And because we have 3 examples of this, we cannot learn to any other, it does not become like a general category, rather only these 3 will be punishable by death. If the kohen is standing on something else, meaning not on the floor or on an animal, the service becomes invalid. Just like when the kohen is holding the kli sharet, when he's holding the sanctified utensil, he has to hold it directly. There can't be anything interrupting the utensil and the person's hand. Let's say the person had 1 foot on a utensil and 1 foot on the floor. So if you can move the utensil and he would still be standing on the floor on the other foot, then it's valid. If not, then not. Then the Gemara asks, let's say, so the floor of the Beit HaMikdash was actually a stone floor with tiles. So the Gemara now asks, what if one of the tiles was removed and the person is standing on the dirt of the floor of the Beit HaMikdash? So is that seed as still standing on, in the courtyard? Then it's fine. And then the Gemara discusses that this is a discussion if David, right, did King David sanctify the floor of the temple, or also what was underneath, right, all the way through. So the Gemara actually concludes that yes, under the tile is sanctified, But again, it's not normal that you should stand on the dirt, and therefore it ends with teku. Okay. Now we're talking about now we're talking about Kabbalah, right? Accepting the blood. And if the person did it, if the kohen did it with their left hand, it's actually a machloket if that's valid. In general, the service in the Beit HaMikdash needed to be done with the person's right hand. If not, that's the question, right? The question is, does it become invalid or not? So we know that putting the blood on the mizbeach needs to be done with the right hand, and therefore collecting the blood should be the same law as putting the blood on the altar, or not necessarily, maybe only putting it on the altar, which is called nitina, putting it on, that has to be done with the right, but not necessarily Kabbalah. Right, so then the Gemara says it's actually a gzeira shava, right? We link or compare Kabbalah, right, accepting the blood or collecting the blood with nitina, with putting the blood on the altar. Right, they're done, one is done with a finger, one is done with a hand, and therefore both need the right hand. Or no, we do not link them together, and therefore putting it on the mizbeach needs to be done with the right hand, but accepting the blood can actually be done with the left hand. Again, or maybe the opposite, accepting the blood needs to be done with the right hand, but putting it on maybe does not need the right hand. Okay, and then the Gemara talks about, so we spoke about a finger puts it on the altar, on the mizbeach, a hand collects the blood, and then we go to the kmitza. Kmitza was when they scooped out a handful of the grain offering of the mincha, and that also needs to be done with the right hand. So as we see, all of these things need to be done with the right. Okay, another opinion is no, it actually can be done with the left hand. Again, Kabbalah, holding the utensil while we gather the blood. Okay, then there's a machloket if zrika, sprinkling the blood, can be done with the left hand. Some say it's valid, some say it is invalid. And since we're talking about doing things on the right, the Gemara brings other cases where we have this. So chalitza, if you remember a long time ago in Masechet Yevamot, we talked about the chalitza ceremony for the brother-in-law, right? The brother who dies, his brother needs to marry the widow. If he doesn't want to, they can do chalitza. And that needs to be done on the right foot, right? She removes his sandal, that's the right foot. The slave who wants to stay part of the household needs to get his right ear pierced. Again, as we said, kmitza needs to be done with the right, or as we said, maybe it could be done with the left. Okay, daf 25, the next Mishnah. If the blood spilt on the floor from the animal, meaning they slaughter the animal, and then the blood, instead of going into the kli sharet, into the sanctified utensil, it goes on the floor. So then you cannot scoop it back up and put it into the utensil, right? It becomes invalid. However, if it falls from the utensil, then that would be valid. So now the Gemara explains that when the kohen is collecting the blood, it needs to be what's called dam hanefesh, which literally means the blood of the soul. But it basically is the blood that comes out right away after the incision is made. The blood has to come directly from the animal, and therefore you cannot scoop it up from the floor. This was a very interesting limud, right? The pasuk says midam hapar. You have to take from the blood of the ox, and they basically move the mem, midam hapar. They move the mem, and they say, oh, it really means dam mehapar. You have to take blood directly from the animal and not from the floor. Now, the verse is actually speaking about the leftover blood, but it's also speaking about accepting the blood, that you need to collect all the blood. And if there's blood left on the knife, you cannot drip it into the kli, into the utensil. You have to wipe it off on the outside of the kli. And as the blood was being collected, so the Gemara asks a question, right? We said that the blood needs to be collected in this kli. What happens if, as the blood is coming in, the bottom of this utensil falls away? So now, remember we said, if it goes into the kli and then on the floor, you can pick it up. If it doesn't go into the kli, then you cannot pick it up. So the Gemara asks, if the blood, right, is coming in, but it can never land inside because there's no bottom to the utensil, is it as if it was in the utensil or not? That is the question, right? Is it seen as if it's at rest, even though it could never be at rest? Or no, right, because it passes through, it would not be valid. So the Gemara brings the case of a barrel, the same thing, wine going into a barrel, and it says that the airspace of the utensil is like the utensil itself, and therefore it would be as if it entered this kli sheret. Okay, now the Gemara asks, what if the kohen nicked a part of the ear of the ox after he slaughtered the animal, but before Kabbalah? That would be invalid, and it's invalid for all types of sacrifices. Kodshe kodshim, meaning the highest level, even kodshe kalim, because if you're doing Kabbalah and the animal has a blemish, now it is invalid. But it says that to sprinkle the blood, you only need a kazait, a small amount of the meat or the fats have to be around. That seems to say that it doesn't matter if there's a blemish in the animal. So the Gemara says, no, we're actually speaking about a different type of blemish, and that is the age of the animal, right? The animal must be the right age. What happens if the animal is inside the courtyard, but its legs are outside the courtyard? So if he cut off the legs and then did shchita, so then that would be valid. Don't worry, the Gemara is going to say, how could that be? That's obviously a blemish. If he did shchita and then he cut off the legs, that would be invalid. What's the case here? So we're at the top of daf 26. The case is that if you do shchita and part of the animal is outside, then the blood was outside of the Beit HaMikdash, and then it comes back in and you're collecting it. That would be a problem. Rather, what's the case? You did shchita, then you cut off the legs, and then you did Kabbalah, then you accepted the blood. So that would be valid. But again, the Gemara says, wait a minute, how can you just said if you nick the ear, it makes it invalid. How can you cut off the legs of an animal? So the Gemara says, don't worry. It says that what did they do? They cut the flesh of the animal, but they leave the bone, and therefore the animal is still intact. But this shows that the blood that's in the flesh is still considered blood, and if it's outside of the Beit HaMikdash, it invalidates the Kabbalah, and therefore it would make the korban, the sacrifice, invalid. Okay, then the Gemara says maybe it's only for Kodshe Kachim. Again, Kodshe Kachim is the highest level of sacrifices, either the Olah, which is burnt, or a Chatat, or an Asham, where only the Kohanim eat from the sacrifice, as opposed to Kodshe Kalim, which is where the owner also partakes in the meat as well. Okay, now what's the difference? Kodshe Kodshim, again, Olah, Chatat, Asham, they need to be slaughtered. The Shechita needs to be in the north of the Beit HaMikdash, right? And the Kabbalah also has to be in the north. Let's say the Kohen stood in the south, but did the Shechita in the north, right? Again, there's like a line that goes across an imaginary line near the altar that separates the north part from the south part. So if he stood in the south part but did Shechita in the north, that is valid. It goes according to where the animal is. But if he stood in the south and collected the blood in the north, that's invalid, right? Because again, for Kabbalah, it's about where the kohen is. For Shechita, for the slaughtering, it's where the animal is. Let's say the animal at the time of slaughter started to convulse, and then it went from the north side to the south side, and then it went back again. That would be valid. It's a valid sacrifice. Okay, next, Kodshe Kalim. Kodshe Kalim mean lighter, sanctified, right, sacrifices. These are sacrifices where the owner partakes in eating from the meat. So that's a shlamim, that's a todah, that's a that is Pesach, right? Those sacrifices, the shechita can be in the whole azara, doesn't only have to be in the north side, and Kabbalah also has to be done in the azara. Let's say the kohen stood outside the azara and did shechita inside, that would be valid. And as we learned, even a non-kohen can do shechita, so that would be valid. But for Kabbalah, that would be invalid. Again, Kabbalah goes according to where the person is. However, if the person had his head and most of his body inside the courtyard, here it would not be valid because he himself is not in the courtyard. Okay, let's say, and now the Gemara gets a little, maybe one can say fantastical, but now we're really going to try to push the limits of this discussion. So let's say they hung the animal in the airspace of the courtyard of the Azara, and then they did shechita. So that would be invalid. Let's say the kohen is the one that's hanging in the air, so and the animal was on the floor, then it's valid. As we said, shechita or slaughtering goes according to where the animal is. Okay, but you cannot do this with Kabbalah, right? Again, the kohen needs to be on the north side. If they hung the animal and then did Kabbalah when the kohen was standing in the courtyard, then in the Azara, then it would be valid. Okay, or Abaye says, all of these cases are invalid, except for if a kohen was suspended and did shechita, for Kodshe Kachim and for Kodshe Kalim, they're all valid except for the Kohen suspended who did Kabbalah, right? Because again, Kabbalah goes according to the Kohen. Okay, if the airspace of the Azara is like the Azara, so then all of it should be okay. Therefore, they're all valid, both for Kodshe Kachim and for Kodshe Kalim, except if they hung the animal and did shechita or Kabbalah, right? That would be problematic. Also, if the kohen was inside, but part of him was outside, maybe his hair was outside, that would be invalid. Okay. Next Mishnah on Daf 26. If you put the blood on the ramp or on the wrong place of the Mizbeach, we're going to learn, right? So the Mizbeach was this large square, and it had a line, the Chut HaSikra, about 2/3 up. And this line went around the Mizbeach, and that demarcated the upper part from the lower part. And we're going to learn that certain sacrifices need their blood put on the upper part, and other sacrifices need the blood put on the lower side. So if you put the blood in the wrong place on the altar, again, above or below, or inside, meaning in the Kodesh, in the Beit HaMikdash, in the building, as opposed to outside, or vice versa. So the sacrifice is pasul, it is invalid, but you do not get karet. So the punishment is a little bit less harsh, but you did invalidate the sacrifice. So now the Gemara explains that the sacrifice is invalid, but the owner still does get atonement. They cannot eat from the meat, but again, and putting the blood on an invalid place, it would still be okay for the owner to get atonement from that sacrifice. If the improper person put blood in the wrong place, so then if there's still some blood left, you should go back to the old blood and then do it again. So the Gemara explains that if a valid person put it in the wrong place, then maybe it's valid, but if the wrong person put it, then it would be invalid. Okay, now we're going to talk about wrong intent, right? So maybe you only go back to get more blood if you did Kabbalah with the wrong intent, but not zrika, not sprinkling the blood, or maybe even also with the sprinkling of the blood. But if the wrong person did the action, so then the intent doesn't matter because it's the wrong person in the first place. Okay, so let's say a person intended to put the blood in the wrong place, but then later intended to put it outside of the Beit HaMikdash. This would be invalid. And we're going to learn in a minute that the wrong time, if you have intent for the wrong time, then that's called pigul. Pigul invalidates the sacrifice and the person gets karet. And this actually shows that the original thought didn't mess up the sacrifice at all. Okay, now Daf 27, we learn that if it was, so then the question is the wrong place seen as if you put it in the right place? So if that would be the case, then it should be pigul, because we're going to learn that pigul is where a person has the wrong intent, right? So he's slaughtering the animal and he's like, whoa, I can't wait to put the blood on the altar tomorrow, right? That is what's called wrong time, chutz lizmano, that is pigul. We're going to learn that in order for it to be pigul, all the other activities needed to be perfect. Only this activity with the wrong intent is what messes up the sacrifice. So here the Gemara discusses, is putting the blood on the wrong place on the altar, does that invalidate the sacrifice or not? Let's say a person had intent to let the blood sit and not put it on the altar, so then that would invalidate the sacrifice. Or let's say sprinkling in the wrong place, that is invalid, that's pasul. But if he has the wrong intent, so then again, that invalidates the korban. But if he didn't have the wrong intent, so then it would not be invalidated. Again, chut lizmano, meaning in the wrong time or in the wrong place, and then you put it in the wrong place, that wrong place can be seen as okay, right? Depending on what other intentions the person had. So we said that there's a case where the sacrifice is invalid, but the person does not get karet. This is even with the intent of pigul and no karet, because it was invalidated already because the blood was put on the wrong place. Again, because the blood was put in the wrong place, this sacrifice cannot be pigul anymore. Okay, we said that you can't gather the blood again and sprinkle it again because here you put it in the wrong place. Or maybe actually you can regather some more of the blood and therefore and then sprinkle it again. Oh, sorry. Okay. Baruch Hashem, it's been a long chag. It's been great. I forgot to say Moadim L'Simcha to everybody. Okay, let's keep going. If the blood was supposed to be below the line and it was put above, that is invalid, even though it's going to drip down into the right area. There's a machluket if it was supposed to be outside and it was put inside, again, in the kodesh, in the building, or the opposite, it was put outside. The question is, can you regather it or not? Right? The verse says, Zot hi ha'olah, this specific thing is the olah. This limits the sacrifice. What does that mean? It's specific things that are going to invalidate the sacrifice, and certain things don't necessarily invalidate the sacrifice. The Gemara teaches us that certain things, even though you aren't supposed to put them on the mizbeach, on the altar, if you do put them on the altar, you do not take them down. Whereas other things that there's something inherently wrong with the actual physical sacrifice or animal, if they are put on the altar, then they must be taken off the altar, right? It would not be okay. The inner mizbeach, the gold mizbeach for the incense, sanctifies anything that's put on it. So blood or the komets, the grain offering, foreign ktoret, incense, if it was put on the outside mizbeach, on the large mizbeach outside, that you would have to take off. But the inner altar, the inner mizbeach, can sanctify anything, even if it was not normally put on that altar, right? The altar on the inside in the Kodesh was only used for incense, for the Ktoret, and for blood, but not for the grain offering. Next Mishnah. Let's say, so now we're going to talk about pigul, right? So a person did shchita, right? Slaughtered the animal in mind that he was going to sprinkle the blood outside, right? Not in the Beit HaMikdash, or burn the intestines outside, or eat the meat outside. or eat a kazait of the skin of the tail. All of these things, the sacrifice is invalid, but you would not get karet, right? Chut lim komo, in the wrong place, is invalid, and it's pigul, but you do not get karet. However, if let's say you slaughtered the animal so that you would sprinkle the blood tomorrow or eat the meat tomorrow, that's pigul, and you get karet for those thoughts. So now the Gemara explains on Daf 28 that the skin of the tail is like the tail. This is called the aliyah. And you could have pigul in this with this part of the animal, and let's say you slaughtered the animal thinking about eating something that's not normally eaten, then it does not become invalidated. It stays a valid korban. Or another opinion is it does get invalidated. Or another opinion is the skin of the tail is not like the tail, and it's eaten, it's not burnt, and therefore, if you have a different intent, it would affect the sacrifice. Okay. There are two verses that teach about pigul. Again, chutz lizmano, in the wrong time, that's pigul, and you get karet. And only in one of the pigul, intentions, only one of them is going to get karet. Outside of time, right? In the wrong time gets karet. In the wrong place, you do not get karet. There's another verse that teaches in the wrong place that it is invalid. Again, but you do not get karet for that sacrifice, for that mistake. Notar, if you left the meat over past its, consumption day, or if you thought about doing an avodah in the wrong time, then the person will get karet. Okay. The Gemara continues. So now there's a braita that goes through the whole verse about pigul and how each thing each word teaches something else. So it says you have to eat achol ya'achel. That means that anything that is eaten either by the person, meaning if a person eats the meat, either the kohen or the owner, or it's burnt on the mizbeach. As we learned in the introduction, burning the meat on the mizbeach is like eating, and therefore it is also within the realm of pigul, and all the chutz lizmah, and then all the you had wrong intention in the beginning, but the rest of the service was done properly, or vice versa. You did something proper and then you had the wrong intention. That would be called pigul. And the wrong intention invalidates the sacrifice, but not when you're eating it on the wrong day. It's only when you're thinking about eating it on the wrong day. The verse teaches that the sacrifice becomes invalid, but not the kohen. And again, lo yichashev teaches that no other improper intent could be involved in order for it to be pigul. Okay, last daf 29. Again, the word pigul is going to teach in doing it in the wrong place. Yihiyeh teaches that half a kazait with the intent of the wrong place, followed by half a kazait in the wrong time, do combine. But as we said, only one of them gets karet. The word shlishi means that it has to happen in the azara, in the courtyard, not outside, as opposed to other things. Those can happen. Those can also, that's where everything is happening in the courtyard. There's another verse that teaches that if you intended to eat the meat on the third day, not that you are eating the meat on the third day, rather you're intending to eat it on the third day. Right? Again, it's very important to recognize the value that we are giving to thoughts or maybe words, right? Maybe you have to verbalize it, but either way, it's not when you actually eat the meat 3 days later, it's when you're thinking about or planning to eat the meat 3 days later. Okay. Then the Gemara talks about if a person takes a vow to bring a sacrifice and they have the wrong intent, that's not called pigul, right? Pigul is only when you're doing one of the 4 services that was done in the Beit HaMikdash. Okay, if you have wrong thoughts, one opinion is that you get lashes, even though it was only a thought. Okay, we're going to do the next Mishnah. It's a very long Mishnah. Okay, so the Mishnah says, here is the rule, right? If you have the wrong intent during one of the 4 avodot, again, shchita, right, slaughtering, kabbalah, accepting the blood, holacha, walking to the mizbeach, and then zrika, sprinkling the blood. If you have improper intentions during one of these avodot, then if you have intent for it to be in the wrong place, it becomes invalid, but no karet. Wrong time, it becomes pigul, and you get karet as long as you did everything else properly. If you did shchita properly and the rest of the avodot, you had the idea that you're going to do it at the wrong time, or shchita was done with the improper thoughts and the rest was done okay, that is pigul. If you do shchita with the intent to eat it in the wrong place and the rest with intent of the wrong time, or lo lishmah, not for that sacrifice, or the opposite, this is not pigul, right? Pigul needs to be the only disqualifying concept or idea. If you had thoughts to eat 1 kazait outside and 1 kazait tomorrow, or half and half, this is invalid, but you do not get karet. If you intended to, let's say, eat the meat at the wrong time first, and then you had other thoughts, then you still get karet because the original intent was wrong. If the original thought was the wrong place, it becomes invalid. If you had intent to eat half a kazait and burn half a kazait, that would be valid, meaning it does not combine. And even though we called them both eating of a person and eating of the mizbeach, even so, they do not combine to make a full kazait. And with that, we are going to finish today's class. And I want to wish everyone I guess, happy Hoshana Rabbah, a good kvittel, as they say. And also wishing everyone a Chag Sameach for Simchat Torah. And Be'ezrat Hashem, may our learning be in the merit of Be'ezrat Hashem. Just really, we're all holding our breaths and hoping for good news. Any hour now, Be'ezrat Hashem, tomorrow, it'll be a different reality. So Be'ezrat Hashem, I hope we will hear only good news. We have a few minutes, so if anybody has any questions, I'm happy to answer them. And as I said, for those of you who were not here in the beginning, next week class, we're going back to Wednesdays. So Be'ezrat Hashem, back to Wednesdays. Though in a few weeks, we're going to be changing the clock. So there might be some changes, but we're back to the regular day, Be'ezrat Hashem, next week. Okay, any questions, comments?
Yes, I just wanted to say I ordered this and it arrived today. Yesod HaMizbeach.
Pick it up and see.
Yeah. Lexicon Ezer Musagim Beseder Kochim. And as you were saying, pigul, all kinds of things, I'm opening it up and I'm looking at it, so it's really, really very helpful. Yeah,
Yes.
But it's Hebrew to Hebrew, so it's,
Right.
It's, so for me, it's not a problem, but, other people may have difficulty with it.
Yeah, Yasher Koach, that is fantastic. Enjoy it. Yeah, I do love that the art scroll has this glossary at the back in every single volume, and they're so kind to repeat these words that we've already had for 3 years, and yet they repeat them for us. So we're looking again. Yes, we are.
Good.
And the Nasan and the pigul, always those two, I get them confused. Nasan is leftovers, right?
No
Basically,
tar.
No tar.
No sar. No sar or no tar.
Yep. And so it is always confusing to me. So here we were in that again, and I'm like, oi, because I still, but repetition. We all need repetition.
I try to use both the English and the Hebrew words as much as possible, just so that everybody can hear all the words, so that we can try to remember the concepts, because it is challenging concepts.
And sometimes the modern Hebrew word helps me understand, but sometimes it's just the opposite, because the modern Hebrew has one meaning, but the Talmudic meaning is different, because it's not what today was the academia decided that the meaning was going to be this, and there's a different connotation. The denotation may be the same, but the connotation is different.
Right.
So.
And I've always reminded, I've said it once or twice before over the years, but this concept that they tell us that when this was all actually happening, you could choose your kohen. You could. I mean, and I think that's great, because you're like, I know that guy. I know that guy's really frum. He's really good. He knows me. He's going to be very careful with my offering. Right? Because some of these concepts, it seems like it is, the error of the one who is handling the blood, not the person who brought it, that will invalidate. And that seems like, how would the person who gave it ever know that had happened? It all, I guess, is just above. But I mean, you wouldn't know. I think you wouldn't know. You just trust, but it could have gone wrong for you.
Yeah, I think it's complicated, especially if, right, one could construct a case where the person brings the sacrifice and then stands and watches to see that the kohen is doing it, and he's like, oh, that's mine, that's mine. I envision maybe a board like at the doctor's office. We are now servicing number 345. Maybe it'll be like that. So you're right, meaning the Gemara will talk about all mix-ups, and when the kohen has the wrong, right, and then who's liable if the kohen messes up my korban? That's not my fault. So the Gemara is going to discuss, and has discussed, these issues of liability and how it happened, and it really shows how much the kohanim needed to be, as they say nowadays, locked in, really needed to be focused on exactly what they were doing, which is why I think it's interesting that you say this now that I'm thinking out loud, which is why I think our Masechet started with lo lishmah, right? Like, if you just don't think about anything, then that's already better than, oh, wait, I'm going to do this in the wrong way, right? So I think you have to really kind of go out of your way to mess it up. Again, maybe the neutral case would be the natural, and hopefully you're thinking the right thing, but even if you're thinking nothing, that's also okay. Again, for most things.
And the women would have some access in some ways, but mostly would not have any kind of eye connection to what happened. Right, they're a little farther back.
They are a little further back, but could still see, again, depending on where things are, could still probably see. But you're right, like you have the Ezrat Yisrael and the Ezrat Nashim is outside. But the doors are open and they're very big doors and you could probably see in. But
that's also an example of modern day Ezrat Nashim and Talmudic Ezrat Nashim, because the Ezrat Nashim is not the women's section, according to in the Gemara. In the Beit HaMikdash, the Ezrat Nashim was the courtyard. It's not necessarily for women. I don't know why it was called Ezrat Nashim. But,
right. Well, because during Simchat Beit HaShoeva, they actually built a balcony in that courtyard.
For the women.
There was actually a women's section in that courtyard. But you're right, that on a day-to-day basis, that courtyard was for everyone.
And not just the women.
Correct, not just the women. Yeah.
It's very interesting that you mentioned the fact that it's a Sukkot, and my husband was going, he did this like one day of going through all these different farms and ranches that are opening up. I mean, it's becoming very in style now, in mode to open these ranches. And I'm saying to him, everybody is preparing for the building of the Beit HaMikdash. All of a sudden, everybody has sheep and everybody has goats and everybody has oxen. It's like, wow, we're going back to being farmers and shepherds and whoa, this is interesting. In this day and age of technology, people are just going back to our original roots, and I think this is preparation.
Wow.
Yes.
Amazing.
Beautiful.
Wow.
Reconnecting.
Yeah, it's like 10 of them at least that were opened up in the last 2 months. It's like amazing.
Wow.
Yeah.
All right. Wishing everyone a Chag Sameach and Besorot Tovot.
Amen.
And wishing everyone just wonderful things. Oh, Torah.
I bought myself a little plush toy today.
Oh, enjoy.
Bring a little joy.
I hope you get to dance with it. Don't forget to dance with it. You can dance with your Gemara.
And I've got my own sukkah for the first time in my life. And I can tell you that the experience doing everything, there's a reason we should do everything. It is spectacular. It is like Technicolor reading Kahelet on Sukkot in the sukkah is like no other way I've ever read it before. It's just amazing. And thank you, Rabbanit, for giving of your time and energy to again, continue to connect with us during the Hag. It's very much appreciated.
Yes, absolutely.
It's my pleasure. And may we share many smachot, many happy, good news.
Amen.
All right.
I know, if we have one more second, I just wanted on a personal note. I think this is the 8th year or maybe even more. I just don't remember how many years I've been doing this. There's something that's called Tanakh Yomi, and so every Shabbat you hear the parsha in shul or you read it for yourself, whichever, and every other weekday, you have from Nevi'im Uktuvim. It's all divided by the samach, by the simanim, and from Simchat Torah to Simchat Torah, I finished, not going to depth, but finished the entire Tanakh. So
wow, amazing. Amazing. Yes, there are a few programs that start on Simchat Torah.
Yes.
For people who are interested, you can do like 2 prakim a day plus parsha, and then you finish the Torah in a year.
Yeah, the Torah, Nevi'im, Tuvim, all of it.
Yes.
Yeah.
Amazing. Kol hakavod. Thank you for sharing.
So yeah, I must say it's a feeling of, when it comes to Simchat Torah, I feel the accomplishment and I feel that, full circle.
Wow. That's right. Amazing. And the fullness of the prophets, we have to have them. I know everyone is starting to go back to them again. We have to have them, especially right now. We've got to be reading the prophets and the writings. It has so much for us.
Wow, wow.
Absolutely.
Amazing,
Yeah.
amazing. All right, Chag Sameach,
Chag
everyone.
Sameach.